Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Warrant Committee. Karen, if you could read our attendance for us, please.
Certainly. We have Tom Caldwell, Steve Rice is on Zoom, Lori Connolly, Jay Funley, we have Andrew Coe, Macy Lee, Peter Mon, Brian McGuire, and Judy Steele on Zoom.
Great, thank you very much. So the record shall reflect. You are here. Thank you very much, Karen. Welcome, everybody. Thank you all for being here, and for those online, appreciate it very much. As you saw from our agenda and from our previous discussions, we are very fortunate to have our town administrator here tonight, Nick Milano, to do kind of a bird's eye view of some of the work that he and Amy Dexter and others have been working as to the 2026 budget and a draft warrant article that's bouncing around up at the select board concerning senior citizen property tax exemptions. But as is here on number 2 on our list, we have a special town meeting. There has been conversations at the select board level. You may have seen at the last meeting about a potential February or March meeting. And that would concern the schools and the school building project. And obviously, as we're working on our budget for 2026, big reason why Nick is here tonight to speak to us, we'll be parallel working on the school building project. And then I think probably towards the end of the calendar year, as we get closer, or the beginning of the calendar year, as we get closer to a potential school vote, we'll kind of shift, we'll directly focus on that for a while, get an answer to the town, and then of course we'll immediately pick back up on our budget work for the spring annual town meeting. So all that being said, and I'll know a little bit more, they'll pick a date, and once I know a date for certain regarding any special town meeting in the early spring, late winter, I'll make sure everyone has it in advance. I don't expect it to be a long one. Might only be a couple of items that we could all do in one night. But the school probably being the focus, the school building. So all that being said, if I may, Town Administrator, could you please come to the table? Of course. Thank you so much.
How's it going?
Doing very well. Thank you so much, Mr. Milano, for being here tonight.
Sure, happy to be here.
Yeah. Now, some of you received, and our town administrator forwarded a very voluminous document to us. I have it up here, and it's something typically that we deal with. It's just the draft fiscal 26 budget that's currently being prepared in the building here. So I asked Nick to come in to discuss a little bit about that work, kind of what goes into this, maybe give us a peek into some of the thought process for this fiscal year. And obviously, as I had mentioned, and is on the agenda, the senior citizen property tax exemption. So just kind of give us some ideas about that. So Mr. Milano, the mic is yours, and go discuss anything in whatever order you think is the most appropriate for us.
Very good. Thanks for having me back. Happy to be here. And obviously, we'll be spending some time together over the next 6 months, so I look forward to it. So I'll touch on a couple of things related to the revenue side of the budget first, just a couple of updates since we last met. And just, I pulled a couple slides from the last time I was here, just because they talk about two of the things that came from that presentation, so that I think it'll be helpful to just share those as we go through it. So the first update is that the town's free cash was certified at the end of last month at just over 4.5 million. So give me 1 second, sorry, I'll just pause and then I'll share the screen here. All right, so what you have is just this is the history of free cash slide that I shared last time, and we talked a bit about it, but I have added in the figure for the close of fiscal year 24, which shows just slightly over the $4.5 million number. We talked a bit about what goes into that, and primarily the drivers are money town departments and others did not spend, and money brought in over our revenue forecasts. Those two figures were, I'll just give you round numbers in one moment. So about $2.8 million in excess over forecasted revenues, and $1.7 million in unspent monies that were appropriated in the fiscal 24 budget. That budget year closed June 30th. At year end, the accounting department winds down all the budgets, closes out the fiscal year, submits paperwork to the Department of Revenue, who then certify this free cash figure. So this number is now available for appropriation by town at any town meeting, really. Free cash appropriation votes take a 50% majority vote to be appropriated. And just, we talked about where local receipts were last time, and that's obviously one of the big drivers with 2.8 million over forecast. That was due largely to $1.2 million brought in over our interest income forecast with the strong interest rate environment that we've had. Building permits, were high, several $100,000s over forecast. So these are what's driving that free cash. And then on the flip side, some of the departments that underspent their budget, police department due to staffing, health insurance due to fewer employees on health insurance than anticipated, that you can trace a little bit that back into staffing levels. The other thing I wanted to mention was that our reserve fund turned back $240,000 because the reserve fund last year was $600,000. In this year's budget, the reserve fund is $250,000. So the reserve fund, we had adjusted our revenue forecast this time last year, and we went to town meeting, and we had town meeting move those anticipated new revenues into the reserve fund. So they would do this. They would close out the free cash if they weren't needed. Those are the big items I want to touch on. A lot of the under-expended budgets typically are due to staff turnover. Sometimes we get budget forecasting wrong, and we'll keep that in mind as we go into this year. If we were a little too conservative in places, we use this as an opportunity to think about where are we overly conservative and can be a little bit more hopefully realistic in our forecast. So that's the free cash piece. That came out, I think it was October 11th was the date that was certified. And some of you here a couple of years ago was certified in the spring of 22. So fall is when we typically do this. We want to see it. So it just gives us this clarity moving forward as to what all of the options are as we think about the fiscal 26 budget, excuse me. And then lastly on the slide, I just threw where free cash went. So at the close of fiscal 23, it was $3.3 million in free cash, and it was used, close to $955,000 was used in the capital budget. This year's reserve fund was funded with free cash. We've talked a bit about the pension system that's fully funded. So $1 million is going into the pension system to help keep building up those reserves in the pension system. So that was funded with free cash. Employee benefits, which is primarily health insurance. And then the school building committee had a $400,000 appropriation of free cash in, I think, December of last year. And then lastly, the opioid settlements money, that hasn't been appropriated yet. So that's actually in the 4.5, that's in this year too. We just didn't appropriate all of free cash last year. So we closed out last year with a balance of 155. That these monies are with, can only be spent on certain things governed by the settlement with the prescription pharmaceutical industry. And the health department's having a forum Wednesday night to start talking about how Milton should put these monies to use. And this is the first amount of money that we have received from those settlements. So that's free cash, $4.5 million at the end of the day, available as we proceed into this fiscal year.
So, so I'm probably overthinking it, but the opioid settlements, am I to understand it correctly that every other line is what I would think of as free cash, we can spend on anything, we spent it on this. The opioid settlements, is that free cash that we got from the opioid settlement and we're not allowed to spend on anything else, and so, okay.
Yeah. A municipal finance accounting issue where it was treated as by the state. We had to accept it as general fund revenue, and then it had to be appropriated. They've now changed the bookkeeping procedures where once received, the money can flow to a special account that can then only be appropriated under the rules. So they've changed the law on it. So for the first year, everybody got this money that closed out to free cash for the most part, and then had to figure out what to do with it. We haven't touched it yet, but we will have to at a future town meeting. We just have to appropriate that into this new special revenue account to be used in the future by the health department.
I have a question. You said that the pension was fully funded,
Yes,
and then we did add another $1 million on it?
correct,
So it's a fully funded plus $1 million?
correct.
Okay.
So our cost in this fiscal year is the normal cost, so whatever cost of future benefits of current employees to keep it fully funded, and then we're adding $1 million on top of that in case there's a market downturn and the fund has erosion of its.
How much is in the
investments.
fund?
It's 190 million, right? I think 190 million.
Just curious, how is that money managed? Is there somebody outside managing that money? Or is it-
We are not managing it directly. It's with PRIT, which is the state's system. So we just follow the state's investment, and we're not managing it ourselves. All right. And then the other new news is about new growth. So I showed this slide last time, which is just our tax revenue. And if you see in fiscal 25 column, for new growth, we had forecasted $1 million. New growth is captured up and until June 30th of the prior fiscal year. So the assessors department at the end of the year finalizes their numbers, submits a report to the Department of Revenue at the state, and then they approve our new growth. So in fiscal 25, which is the current budget year, it's actually 1.29 million. So about $300,000 more than anticipated. And this is tracking with what our recent history has been. We've been closer to 1.25 million, as you can see, in the past couple of years, which is good. I share that because as we're building the fiscal 26 budget, as you see in the fiscal 26 column, we've kept the forecast at $850,000. Last year in the budget process, we upped that estimate as we got closer into the new year and felt more confident in that figure. I'm hopeful we'll be able to do the same in fiscal 26. I expect another strong year of free growth pending any economic changes, but and then the next slide just shows some of the history. So as you can see, the last 3 years are outliers compared to our prior trends. There's been a decent amount of new construction, primarily Walcott Woods off of Canton Ave. There's been a couple of smaller subdivisions, Wentworth Farm and Pine Gardens, different parts of Milton. Going forward, there'll be additional new growth that we can count on through the developments. The Ice House development, I think I talked about last time on Blue Hills Parkway, which is a 40B project. 711 Randolph Ave, which is a 40B project that's well underway next to the DPW building. And then two more, 936 Brush Hill Road and the East Milton 40B in East Milton Square have not been permitted yet, but we expect that those applicants will be moving through the building permitting process and begin construction. So those might not have as much, but we are in decent shape to expect strong new growth again this year. So those, just two quick revenue side updates I wanted to share as they're new since we met last time.
Nick, may I?
Yep.
I'm embarrassed. Where's Pine Gardens?
That is off of
Matracas
Pleasant.
is-
So it's I think there's 4 single families
There's
off of Pleasant Street.
5, right in the Matracas development, right
off of
across the
Pleasant
street.
Street?
Yeah,
Off of Pleasant Street,
Oh, okay.
yeah.
I'm
it's
sorry.
actually on Pleasant Street,
Okay, now
right
it's
on
okay.
it.
Yeah, between Gerald and, well, the little alley,
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay, my apologies.
it's behind my parents' house.
I was expecting gardens, like just a big
pines.
and
Pine
pines.
gardens.
But
This
there
is
we go.
Pine Garden, yeah.
I'll be quiet.
All right, so I'll stop sharing my screen there, and then I can go back to it when we're talking about the warrant article for the senior citizen tax exemption. Just as an overall update on the budget process, as the chair mentioned, we have distributed fiscal 26 departmental budget requests. Those are in form of a Excel workbook for each department. Departments sometimes also submit supplemental information in Word docs or in PowerPoint. So when you go into the folder, the shared folder that you should have the link to and have access to, just double check that there's not something else for a department that you're looking at, because there may be something in addition to the workbook. There are multiple tabs within the workbook. We distribute it electronically. We're happy to make hard copies for folks who are looking for anything. Feel free to give us a call. We'll print out whatever you're looking for. Not everything is in there, so if you're looking for DPW or consolidated in particular, those aren't in there. We haven't finalized the select board budget, so that's not in there. And then the shared costs, employee benefits, insurance, we have not uploaded those either. So if you're in charge of any of those departments, reach out to us. We'll give you an update. And then as we make any changes or add these departments into that workbook, we'll just send out a note that they're there. These are what I've asked for in terms of requests from department heads. What we've asked for is a level service budget. So, and I've been pretty direct that, tell us what it costs to run your department today. I think the practice here has been to always just try to minimize year-to-year increases, which I think is fine, but this year I've encouraged folks to, tell us what it costs to run your department, and then we'll go from there. So there's no guarantees in terms of what my recommendation would be that their level service budget requests even necessarily will go forward, but we wanted to make sure that we're able to sit down and say, I'm scrimping on things year to year in order to meet my budget. If that's the case, then, well, let's get your budget, right-size it going forward. I think the best example of that really is vehicle maintenance and repair in the DPW, where they're maintaining all the town vehicles and costs have gone through the roof. Costs to maintain the public safety equipment and apparatus in particular are more expensive. So it's either we can not repair them or try to get that budget to where it needs to be to maintain our fleet accordingly. So that's what we've asked for. We've also asked for supplemental needs, and the departments have provided that. That's an additional tab in the workbooks. And some do more than others in terms of describing what those needs are in writing in the budget workbook and in their narrative, but feel free to ask questions if you have any. I think one trend you'll see is that there are a number of part-time employees in town departments that folks are looking. So they're looking to add staffing, but they're looking to take, a 19-hour position and turn them into a full-time at 37.5 hours. So that's somebody who, or another department's actually looking to take somebody who's 2/3 to full-time. So that's somebody who is already benefit eligible, and it's less expensive than a whole new FTE. So just keep that in mind when you're looking at departments. And then I think that's it on the departmental budgets I wanted to provide. If you're going through them and you have questions, obviously reach out to the department heads. Feel free to reach out to Amy as well, Finance Director Amy Dexter, with questions. She's been away, but will be back tomorrow. So I'm happy to take any questions now. The last, I meant to mention is that debt service. Our debt service budget hasn't been updated yet either, and that's another one of those big other departments. It's not a department, but it's an account that is expensive and has a big dollars assigned to it. So we'll get those in shortly and hopefully have everything wrapped for, I would say in the next few weeks for everybody to review. Happy to take any questions if anybody has anything kind of on a higher level about the departmental budgets.
See, Judy's has her hand up. If we could just take Judy first. Judy, you have a question?
Yes. Nick, I have a curious question. When I was going over the cemetery budget with the department head, I never realized that town departments were paying stormwater taxes. Can you speak to that? I mean, it's a huge number. Well, from my perspective, it's a huge number. It's 17,000 for stormwater, and that's in their budget. So my question goes to this: is all town-owned property subject to stormwater?
Yes, every public property was not exempted from stormwater when the fee was put into place, whether it's a school, town building, or otherwise. Everybody's paying into the stormwater fee. And by the flip side, all town school departments and buildings are paying for water and sewer usage as well.
Okay. And just another follow-up when I was going over the cemetery, if you could explain what longevity is in there. when they line item what each staff member will receive in salary, there's a column for longevity, and I seem to have missed that in the prior years. Could you speak to that? What longevity means?
Sure, it's a payment in the union contracts, depending on the union, depending on the years of service, for just that, for years of service. So some of them are $50 after 5 years, that goes up $50 a year. And the different contracts have different stipends. Longevity is one that I think is across just about all of them. It's across the non-public safety unions. But it's just that. It's an additional payment somebody earns for years of service, depending on which contract and which union they're in.
Thank you.
Sure. And all those union contracts are on the town's human resources page if anybody's interested in taking a look at them.
Right?
Yeah, question, do you give any guidance on inflation to any of the departments? Because I did see like a 10% inflation number in one of the, I don't remember which one it was.
No, all I have said is tell us, look at your past expenses, look at your past usage, and tell us what you think it would cost you to run your department in fiscal '26. And then as we go through it, we might go to somebody and say, that's a little high, that's a little low from there. Sure.
JD, you have a question?
Yeah, I think I do. Are we wrapping up the budget conversation? Yeah, well, okay, I'll come out with my questions. So, budget, big picture, one big question has been override or not override. Is this the appropriate time to talk about that?
Sure.
Okay. Background, and you've heard me say this before. Last time we had an override was 2017, and to me as a resident looking from the outside, it seemed like for several years leading up to 2017, we would say, oh, we probably need an override. Oh, wait, we've barely managed to get enough money to not lay off people. Let's put it off for a year. Then the next year, oh, we've managed to not lay off anybody. Let's not have an override. And then in 2017, they said, oh, it came to be February, March. They said, we're going to need layoffs. Therefore, we need an override. And I don't know if that's what's actually, maybe much more was happening behind the scenes, but as a resident, that seemed like that's what was happening. And what I would love for us to be doing right now is something more forward-looking, more deliberate, less, well, can we scrape through this year without an override, or do we absolutely positively need an override? That we'll figure that out in February or March. All of that is to say, how are we doing on the deliberative process? We've talked about it some among ourselves. I know there's you, there's the select board. I worry a bit that it's going to be everybody looking at everybody else. Maybe you will look at the select board waiting for them to make a decision. Maybe the select board will be looking at you waiting for you to make a decision. Maybe the warrant committee will be looking at you and the select board wondering when you're going to make a decision. And nobody will make a decision until it's the last minute. That's what I worry about. So how's the process going?
Sure, I agree, and I think we're kind of in that trend that you described again, where I think the warrant, if you look back at the past couple of warrants for the annual town meeting, it references next year is probably the year we're going to need an override. And again, we've not had that happen. And I think from a, I have viewed it as we need to gather all the information at this point and then have the select board give the indication from there as to where our next step is. And that is why I've asked for a level service budget and also for supplemental needs. It's why we've been trying to get that free cash certified right away so we know what tools we have going into the budget year with a longer run forecast. I think ultimately the other elephant in the room is the school project, and that is what will be another big factor in that decision. And we expect to hear news about the school building authority and whether the town will be invited into that program, end of November, December timeframe. I think at that point we have gathered all the budgetary information necessary to give the select board a clear pathway to either what a tough balanced budget year might look like without an override, or what an override could do as an alternative. But but that decision I think, will be made in concert with whatever the next step is on the school project. So I would expect and hope to have clarity around that by December, because saying we're not comfortable with potentially, dialing back budget requests to get by another year without an override, and throwing, one-time monies at the issue, let's go in another direction. But that then opens up, as you well know, another conversation is, okay, what's the right number? And how do we build it to be sustainable? And where we're at is now we have all the information to forecast better over the next several years, so we can work on that. But I wouldn't expect a firm decision made until, I would say, hopefully December, and if not, then early January. So that clarity is there moving forward through the rest of the budget process. But it is still, I think, subject to kind of the other big thing that's happening in town. In terms of when a decision will be made, not necessarily whether or not to have one.
I'm not sure I completely followed that, but I guess I will say, when you say collecting information, the select board is the one to make a decision. Ultimately, it's their decision, is my understanding. But what role can we play? I'm specifically thinking about, can we help the select board make a decision? Can we provide information to them? They've got a lot on their plate. You've got a lot on your plate. We maybe, is there something we can do to help give information to the select board to help them make a decision? I would love it for it to be a decision made together. I mean, it's their decision by law, but I would love for it to be a decision that the select board makes in concert with the warrant committee and with our view on the budget.
Yes, sir. I mean, I can follow up and get back to you once I check in with them and go from there. But I think providing feedback, including criticism of how the budget may or may not work over the next couple of years, and how do we set it up to be sustainable over the next couple of years is always valuable. So we'll take that with open ears as we gather, pull everything together to put in front of the electeds to say, here's the lay of the land, here's two pathways, which door are we opening, And the other thing, for folks who are not, it's been several years since there was an override, is that we have to prepare that balanced budget no matter what, because the warrant will include, there's really two budgets. So there's this work to get to what is a pathway to a balanced budget without an override has to happen, because it needs to go on the warrant to give the town meeting members that opportunity to vote on one or the other. And that's work that will have to take place regardless of whether or not there's an override.
I have a question about something else. Change the subject a little bit, it's still related to what.
To the 2026 budget?
It's related to that, yeah. So, with respect to some of these open positions that you said a lot of the free cash comes from, obviously, I think it would be the goal of the departments to fill these positions. For example, I was looking at the police, it seems like there are a few positions open. Do we know, do we have a general sense of what the cause of not being able to fill those? Is it just the people have left, there's just natural turnover, it hasn't been filled yet? Is it non-competitive salary? Is it there just aren't enough people in policing right now? Or just, doesn't have to be that specific department, sure, but in general, sort of, what's the issue?
So I think the places where the two most vacancies are police and DPW, so I can speak to those two in particular. Public Works, I think it's more a matter of being competitive, and what's tricky about Milton is we're competitive with our peers, but we're not necessarily competitive with Quincy and Boston. And because of our geographic location, it poses a challenge for us. We're competitive, again, with the Norwoods and the Dedhams of the world, but not necessarily Milton and Quincy. And we're also can't compete with National Grid and Eversource, which again, more so than my experience in other communities, that is a place where people will move to. We've made some small changes. The Public Works right now is doing on-site and during the workday training for CDL licenses. So there's 6 employees currently in that program. the goal and the challenge will be retaining them once they earn those licenses. But it's a matter of, I think it's a tough job market in that field, and with municipal salaries a little bit slower to catch up than others, and there's just some entities that we just won't compete with. On the other hand, with police, it's, I think, digging out of the lower staffing that they ran into with a lot of turnover in the past couple of years. I think they're at 2 vacancies currently, and for that, we are in civil service, so it takes time to go through the civil service process to hire. Then there's a police academy that takes 6 months, and then there's, several months of field training after they get out of the academy. So that is just, it's a long runway to take somebody from, they sign the list, want to be appointed as a police officer, background check, academy, training, and on the road. And by then, there's often that turnover that just happens naturally. So that's been, we're in good shape. The department has been able to staff back their traffic management and community services department, which we had taken staffing out of. So it's in better shape than it's been, but we still have a couple vacancies to work on. And we just called for a list of potential officers, so we'll be hopefully sending somebody to the academy soon. So it's a longer runway for police and DPW. It's a bigger, kind of knottier question to resolve, unfortunately.
I don't know if you know the answer to this, but the town trains for CDL licenses for DPW?
We brought somebody in. So we hired a
firm?
trainer to come in.
So
under the new rules, we can't anymore.
Right.
They used to be able to, but you can't anymore. So we have brought somebody in to train up to provide this.
Right, they have to be certified.
Correct.
A lot of companies do this, and our company used to do it, where if you pay for their training, you get a commitment from them to work for you for like at least a year or something like that.
It's something we'll talk about with the union contract that's up in June. We do pay a stipend, a small stipend for folks who pass and are CDL licensed. So that's already in place. For this program, we're offering it on site during work, but we didn't pay for it. But those are options that we're continuing to look at. And we'll see how this goes as well.
It's a thought, yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Lori?
But Nick, you made a comment that it was, I might be wrong in what you said, cheaper to move somebody from a part-time position to a full-time position than bringing somebody on full-time?
No, I meant that if their ask is to make somebody who's part-time full-time, it's not as expensive as going from 0 to 1. That's all I meant.
Okay, got you. And then there was, I can't remember which department it was, but there was on the needs-based page for position, or it was just the needs-based. It was a position and it was labeled like approved, but vacant?
Probably approved but not funded, maybe the library. So a couple of departments have established or gone to the personnel board requesting that a new position be created and established.
Okay.
But they have not been funded. Last year, the fiscal 25 budget, or maybe the fiscal 24 budget, funded a new part-time position at the library, but not a full-time position. They had requested and gotten approval from the personnel board for creating the position.
Okay.
But they have not received funding for that position yet.
So does the personnel board determine if they need another position or that this is a new position instead of administrator 1, administrator 2, or something like that?
It's not an additional FTE under a position that's already established. It's a totally new position.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
What's the threshold, what is the town threshold for part-time versus full-time, 32 hours? Or?
Benefits accrue once you average, I think it's 2,000 hours over the course of a year, or there's some look back, but we try to keep, there's been different ways it's been applied. Our approach now is 19 hours or less. It doesn't make sense to have somebody at 30 hours necessarily when they're eligible for all the retirement and health insurance benefits, but we're not getting that last day of work out of them. So right now, part-time is typically moving forward would be 19 hours, but there are positions in the town department set up that are greater than the 19 hours, and they're benefit eligible at that point. It's 30 hours to be eligible for retirement, and once you cross the 20 hours a week, you're eligible for health insurance.
And is that, you said it's not uniform across departments? Or
There will be different like the building department has a couple of employees that are 2/3 time. They have a couple of employees who are 2 days a week, so 16 hours. So it kind of varies in that sense, but we try to limit anything to 19 hours or less unless it's already been established and has been in place.
Thank you.
Sure.
Are there any other questions you have just regarding anything the town administrator sent, or just maybe things you're not sure of or don't recognize?
I guess the only other thing, are there any outstanding claims or lawsuits that, other than the communities, BTA, that we should be aware of that are pending?
No, anything will have been disclosed in the audited financials. I'd have to look to see what's in there, but we can pull that for you.
Tom?
Judy, absolutely.
Oh, thank you. Nick, when you were explaining the hours for retirement, when someone doesn't work, I know yours is 37 and a half, but if we could just use 40, because that's what I'm used to. Someone doesn't work the full week, less than a full week. Do you prorate that on the actual pension payments? In other words, I know what I'm trying to say. Full retirement benefits are the same whether you work 25 hours a week or 37 and a half hours a week.
I don't want to give you the wrong answer now, and we can get back to you for that, just to provide the right information.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Liz?
So I noticed, for example, with the fire department, I'm just looking at the ones that I'm signed to, but they have a lot of money coming in through grants, which is great. Do we have
A specific process by which people find those grants? Are they just sort of the same grants that they apply for every year? How do they find that? And how can we kind of help them, or what do they need for that?
Generally, there are public safety grants that departments typically just get on a recurring basis. The Council on Aging gets an Elder Affairs grant recurring based on the number of, I think it's people age 60 plus. It's a certain amount per person, 60 and over. So there are those grants that are out there that are just kind of, if you exist, you will get them. The competitive grants that it's kind of a decentralized system. There's no grant writer on staff. There's nobody necessarily assigned to it. Our office is available to help, and the state is very good about alerting to you as to what programs are available. We try to apply for anything we can. Chief Madden last year had applied for a federal grant for, it's called a SAFER grant, which would pay for staffing for 3 years, and then the town has to take over that whatever those costs are. That grant application was unsuccessful, but that was a FEMA federal grant that is paperwork intensive and not the easiest to fill out. We have another FEMA grant through the Building Resilient, and something, it's BRIC, B-R-I-C, so Building Resilient something communities probably. But we have a $140,000 design grant to redesign a pump station over on Granite Ave that is susceptible to flooding and sea level rise. So that was a successful effort, and so it really depends on the department, but it's not like there's somebody who's assigned to facilitate those efforts.
Okay, thanks.
Allison, did I see your hand up?
She did lower it, but it wasn't.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I just actually wanted to understand kind of the budget process, especially given that we had a level-based budget the last few years and used free cash. And this year with the ARPA going away, just kind of understanding how financially they're going to be able to build off that budget. And like, they just be putting a level base? You said that they're gonna send over the above the basic needs to try to fill it, but this is where I'm really interested to understand kind of the direction we're going, because last year in March, I confirmed a 4.2 deficit in the school budget going into this year. So I don't know, kind of want to understand the picture we're painting, because we didn't even meet the needs last year on the school side. We were about $750,000 short. So I'm curious to know kind of financially how we're setting this up, to those that are not meeting the ARPA, additionally being in that deficit. We should kind of have an understanding of kind of how that will look.
It's something we have to build. We have to build a budget that is balanced and could be approved by town meeting and put into place. Do I think that will be easy to build? No. Would it require the use of one-time monies again, and then would not be a sustainable budget? Yes. But so at the end of this, requests would be reduced, and we would probably need some one-time monies to make that budget work. So it would be a tough budget year, I think, is the best way to describe it.
Okay.
But that's something we're building, and I need to produce over the next couple of months.
Okay, all right, thank you. The question too of that free cash is that generally for the past couple, was used for not positions, and it was used for, one-time kind of expenditures. So I'm just curious to how we continue to build the free cash into a budget versus using it for one-time expenditures.
I hear your point, and I agree. I think broadly we would want to stay away from using one-time monies for recurring expenses. I'll just note that over the past 3 years, we've had 4.4, 3.3, and $4.5 million in free cash. So where being conservative on the revenues means we could be a little less conservative potentially and fund some of these items through the tax levy. And conversely, maybe there are places that departments can take a little bit of a reduction because they haven't necessarily spent their full appropriation. So I just, if we had $250,000 of free cash, I would be like pressing the alarm button. But I think it's just important to keep that context in mind, as it's coming from unanticipated revenues and it's coming from monies that weren't spent by departments. So that does provide some wiggle room to help build a budget that doesn't mean huge layoffs in that worst case scenario. If our revenue forecasts stay strong and the economy stays strong, that puts us in decent position. Some element of that free cash, and I know Jay has said this from time to time, so I'm stealing his words, but there is some number in that free cash that is recurring. But I would like to I agree with you. I'd like to move away from this process of one-off budgets and not building anything that's truly sustainable for residents to expect.
Jay?
Allison, are you done? Because, really, I want to follow up on something you raised, Allison.
Oh, thank you. No, yeah, I'm all set. Thank you so much.
Okay, yeah, so, to follow up on what Ms. Gagnon just said, I think it would help. I know you're building a fully funded budget, but I think it would help, and maybe you've given us the pieces, and maybe we just need to put the pieces together, but it would help to see, what are the baseline, the level service expenses, and then the money coming in and the free cash. And let's say we ignore free cash for a second. Let's say we look at revenues and expenses. Can you show us, okay, we're $4 million under. And I know it's your job to produce a funded budget. It's not your job to produce a budget that is unfunded, but can you at least show us the pieces?
Oh,
of
yeah,
where we
no,
are?
sorry, we have that, and I am happy to share it with anybody. And I think I've sent you a version of it, haven't
Oh,
we not?
probably.
So, yes, and we just have not produced it because we're still waiting on a couple of the bigger pieces to come in. What we have is a 5-year forecast that lays that all out. With our current revenue estimates, with our current expenditure forecasts, where do we sit? And we're sitting in that $4.5 to $5 million hole we got to dig out of, assuming the school budget's a 4.5% increase. That was just the number I plucked out of thin air and threw into the forecast. So, if it's 6.5, that gap is higher. If it's a 4, that gap's a little bit lower. So that's just kind of where things sit on a very rough back of the envelope number today. We have plugged in the department's requests that we've received. We're just trying to finalize some of these last outstanding ones, but we'll get that into the shared documents folder as well in the next couple of weeks.
So I know you can't predict the future, but it sounds like big picture, maybe we spend all the free cash, then maybe we could get by without an override, but that means we don't hire a firefighter we need, we don't hire a librarian we need, we don't hire whatever the schools say they need, but we also don't declare bankruptcy and don't lay people off. Or with an override, we do, a lot of us have seen, the fire department needs an additional position. The police need additional positions. DPW, schools is its own thing. Is that what we're looking at, is maybe another lean year without an override? Or a year with an override where we fill some of these positions that haven't been filled in 7 years? Are you not comfortable answering that? If you're not,
all
that's
I'm
fine.
saying is I will present those 2 options, and the direction will be given, and then we'll implement from there. So
Okay.
We're pulling that together, and that's, I think, one of the changes that we've tried to embrace over the past couple of years is not just go to departments and say, okay, roll over your last year budget and we're calling it a budget season, but say, okay, think about your department, where do you want to invest in? So now we have that information that says, what do you need to kind of expand your services and improve your services? So we have that as a baseline, so we know what the needs are today. And I think that gives us that element to say, hey, if we were to move forward with an override, here are some of the things that we could invest in. We could increase staffing at the Council on Aging, we can increase staffing at the library, we can get the DPW to be right sized and they're not cutting projects at the end of the year. So those are the kinds of conversations that this allows us to have and will have in the context of which pathway do we want to go down.
Thank you.
Sure.
Anything else? Okay, why don't we move on? If you could, Mr. Milano, I know you wanted to speak briefly, and I asked you to, just concerning the senior citizen property tax exemption.
Sure. I think, did you distribute that presentation, Tom? I had sent it last week or maybe
Yes.
a week and a half ago. Okay.
I'm sorry, I'm forwarding so much, and Karen's
sure.
helping me. I'm trying to keep straight.
So I'll go through this relatively quickly, only because this is a warrant article that hasn't been approved by anybody quite yet. Ideally, so to take a step back, as we were thinking about this budget year, we were going back to the drawing board on both the revenue side and also property tax burden side to have some of these conversations that if we're going to go forward with an override or have a big school project that folks are voting on, have we thought about all of our revenue opportunities? Have we thought about ways to reduce burdens on folks who may not be able to as easily bear the burden of overrides or other additional taxes? So one thing that came out of these conversations was a tax exemption for seniors that was means tested that other cities and towns have adopted and put into place. So the idea was, what is something easy to understand, administer, apply for, and provide? We don't want to create something bespoke to Milton and then have 100 pieces of paper to be filled out in the assessor's office for folks to benefit from it. So we wanted to come up with something that was also means tested, so using somebody's assets to determine whether they should qualify for, in this case, a tax exemption. And the solution was to look at something that tracks the senior circuit breaker tax credit, which is a tax credit that is available through the Massachusetts Department of Revenue for seniors today in Massachusetts. So it's an annual tax credit that seniors are eligible for if you meet certain criteria. I've listed all the criteria here, so older than 65, and then in tax year 24, your income must be below $72,000 for a single individual, and I think it's $91,000 for a head of household. There's a typo there, it's not $1,000, I can guarantee you that. I think it's
Change
72.
the numbers.
I updated them for 24. So I think it's 72,000 for a single, 91,000 for people filing joint, or 91,000 for a household. I'll have to update those. Sorry about that. 109,000 for married couples filing a joint return. So if you're a homeowner to qualify for this tax credit, this is not the Milton version. This is just the state version. If you're a homeowner, your tax payments plus half of your water and sewer payments have to exceed 10% of your total income for the tax year. And then if you're a renter, it's 25% of your rent must exceed 10% of your income. There's a new slide that I put together that shows an example of that math, but the point is not everybody earns the maximum. It's a sliding scale depending on what the math tells you. And then the last piece of it is that the assessed valuation of the home has to be below the 1.172 million. So it's 1,172,000 assessed value that your home has to be below, and that's for the 2024 tax year. So this is an example of how that math works. You take your real estate tax, you add half of your water and sewer payments. If your income, in the case on the left, was $40,000, 10% of that amount is $4,000, so you're $4,200 in taxes, you're $800 and half of your water and sewer, unless your income gets you to a $1,000 circuit breaker tax credit. And then for the renters, similar, you take 25% of your rent paid, 10% of your income, and then you get to a circuit breaker tax credit of $500. So if folks are out there and have not taken advantage of this, you can apply for the prior tax year if you filed and amended something. I think the Department of Revenue page had. I'm not an expert on these matters, but if you think you might be eligible, the information on the website is pretty clear, and they have some videos about it that explain it better than I can. So anyways, we are proposing that we do a home rule petition to establish a means-tested local exemption that tracks the circuit breaker eligibility. So we're not creating any specific Milton eligibility. If you're eligible and receive the circuit breaker, you would get a match from Milton for that amount as a tax exemption on your property taxes. So the variables would be, what is that match? Some communities do 75% of what you get from the state. Others do 100%. Some do 150% of that match. So that's a variable. And then additional eligibility criteria that we've seen communities adopt is that a residency requirement of some amount of years. It's commonly 10 years, because the idea is this is supposed to help seniors who are aging in place in Milton, who have limited income, limited assets, and are living in their home. And so the other item was, no significant assets, and then that if the home is in a trust, the trust documents would be reviewed to make sure that the person who's applying for the exemption is a beneficiary of the trust. Those wouldn't be in the home rule petition language. It would be more for the Board of Assessors to put into place when they develop an application for it. And then that percent match that I described would be set annually by the Select Board, Board of Assessors, or set by town meeting. So some of these are variables, but the idea is you take something that already exists, that people are already applying for, that we would have evidence that they're eligible for, and then provide that locally as a property tax exemption here in Milton. So again, we're using the eligibility from the state, have an annual application process. And I just want to be clear, this doesn't mean that Milton would collect less taxes. It means we would shift the burden away from these homeowners into everybody else. So that's, if you're not eligible for it, your tax bill will go up slightly as a result of this program potentially being rolled out. One thing that other communities do is some I've seen limit the total amount of the exemption. So they'll say they have $250,000 available for the exemption, and then they'll set their match to reflect that. So once they have all the applications in, they'll do the math to figure out what everybody gets. So here are the communities that have done it or are working on it. That was on the list, so you would have seen that in the presentation that was sent out. And we talked a bit. So in 2022, there are 415 filers in Milton who would have been eligible. $468,000 in credit was claimed, and the average credit was about $1,100. The usage wouldn't necessarily be that full amount because folks might be renters, so they're not paying property tax. People might not apply. And talking to a few other communities, they say, count on probably half of the filers being eligible. So we did just a quick math. If the average house is about $1 million and the tax bill is about $10,000, there would probably be an increase if we were to have 100 eligible people at the max, which would be the $259,000. So this math isn't great. It's just to give you a sense of if we had 100 eligible people, they all got 100% match, they got the maximum, that would cost about a $30 tax bill increase for the average house in order to provide this program. So I went through that quickly, especially the math. I would just say, I wanted to get this out there so that the Warrant Committee was aware of it. I expect the Select Board would include it as a warrant article at our next town meeting. Since it's a home rule petition, it has to be approved by town meeting, then approved by the legislature before it could go into effect. So really the timeline on that means it might be a challenge for it to be in effect until, fiscal 26 is probably realistic, but certainly not this fiscal year for that to go into effect. So there is a process involved to get it approved. But that's the broad strokes. Happy to take questions now, or if it's submitted as a warrant article, maybe we'll spend some more time talking about it, but.
Sure, just one quick, I was actually asked to that, Mr. Milano, that this would be something we would expect at the annual, or is the Select Board, I know you can't read their minds, are they expecting maybe this in February or March?
We've talked about the special because of that timeline involved in getting it filed at the State House, and then being at kind of their mercy as to terms of when they'll get to it. So the sooner we can get it there, the better, just in terms of getting it kind of resolved. Once we're in the new session, like to get it in December wouldn't really do much, but to get it earlier in the next calendar year when the new session starts and all the new legislators are sworn in would be ideal rather than, late May, early June. So I think the goal would be to get it in front of the special. So we would be talking about it potentially in a few weeks.
Sure, obviously that would probably like to maybe talk to the Council on Aging or, just some other interested departments in town, but we would definitely like to talk about it more. Nick, thank you very much.
Sure. And then just on the town meeting piece, I just wanted to share that, so we're looking at, I think it's really narrowed down to the February 10th or February 24th. The 10th would mean that the warrant would have to be to the printer and everything final January 15th, so a full month beforehand. The 24th gives us 2 more full weeks to the end of January, which I think is probably more beneficial than trying to get everything wrapped up early January. So I don't know where they'll land, but we had talked about the 10th of February, the 24th of February, potentially the 3rd of March. That first week of March doesn't look good. So I know the 24th would be the first Monday after February vacation. Everybody's just getting back, but it would, for this committee and for our office, it would give us a much enjoyed final 2 weeks to get the warrant together and done. If there's only a couple warrant articles, that's less of an issue. But the warrant committee's recommendations and comments obviously are the crucial piece of that warrant. So those 2 weeks might be pretty helpful, especially this time of year as we head into the holidays and the new year.
Great. Jay?
Again, asking you to read the minds of the Select Board, are they, this sounds like a great idea, especially if it comes at the same time as an operational override. Is the Select Board thinking of moving forward with these independently, or only if we think we're going for an override, we'd do the property tax exemption this year? And
I think because There will likely be some big question about property taxes and maybe two
Okay.
in the immediate future. The idea was let's get it moving
Okay.
because that is so close on the horizon. We haven't come up with many answers on the revenue side. We're still working, but this is at least on the tax burden side. It was felt something we could do. And that's where the genesis started, and the assistant town administrator, Nick Connors, did all the legwork, so I haven't done much on this other than speak to you tonight.
Thank you.
Sure.
Anybody have any questions? Okay.
What's the genesis of this program? Who started this?
We had touched base with, I think the conversation really started with Hingham because they had done a couple of things that we thought were interesting. And Nick had talked to their assistant town manager, and they mentioned this program. And then I think they referenced a couple of other communities, and it was those communities who said, you know, you can create your own version of it, or you can track with the circuit breaker that makes the administrative burden and also like the eligibility piece of it easier, rather than staff here or the Board of Assessors determining who's eligible, who's not. Have some other program determine that, and then Milton's decision are really anything extra for eligibility and the percent match. So it came out of those conversations with other communities.
Thanks.
Sure.
Okay. Seeing no hands raised, Mr. Milano, thank you very much for your time
you.
and the presentation. We appreciate it.
Sure. So the select board will likely, hopefully, have a conversation about the town meeting at our next meeting on the 12th. And if any other warrant articles start to percolate around, I'll keep you updated and let the committee know.
Thank you very
Thank you.
much. Have a nice evening.
Yeah, you too. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Okay. Well, we got a couple of more stuff, a couple more things. I have some discussion down here. If anybody wants to talk about what we heard just with the town administrator right now. I know there's you have your individual assignments. We have a lot of spreadsheets and everything to look at. We will be having Nick in here several more times to talk budget. He was gracious enough to come in. As he indicated, you know, he doesn't have a lot of stuff completed yet. But in my conversations, and as he mentioned today, getting that prior to December, we're ahead of the game now, I think, on both fronts. So budget-wise, and I think hopefully for schools too. So, I don't know, does anybody want to?
I can start with the easy one. Obviously, the senior citizen property tax exemption, I think it's a great idea, great program. I do want to validate it that whatever the credit is will make a material impact. If it's a drop in the bucket, or I'm not sure what the purpose of having the program would be, or just validate that the impact to the actual recipients is material.
So yeah, I can say I know that through frequent town meetings just over the course of a long time, it's come up. I want to say it comes up like every time. And especially, I think the most recent one I talked about, a lot of senior citizens, obviously who have lived in this town for like 30, 40, 50 years, right? And then they're not a burden, they don't have kids, I don't say burden that way, but they're not drawing resources like my family is, right? And, some of the other families here. So, and like, what can we do to kind of give back? And it's a very small percentage, obviously, but I have, on its face now, it looks like a really good thing. But to your point, absolutely, 100%. And I think a lot of people in Milton will avail themselves of it, just given the population.
Because I do want to make sure that people that lived here a long time have the ability to stay here, if possible. But if what they need is $5,000, and this is going to issue them a $500 credit, it doesn't have the impact that we think it will. So I just want to make sure that in the administration of this, that we test and either validate through the COA or whoever that the program will have the impact that we think it will. Otherwise, all we're doing is creating another burden from administration cost from a cost administration standpoint for a program that has minor impact. That's like me giving you $1 for lunch.
Yeah, you keep it, right? Yeah, just keep it. It doesn't really make a difference at this point. But no, that's an excellent point. Thank you.
Sounds like it might be an offset for increased taxes to come. I mean, it sounds like a PR effort almost.
Right, right.
Sense to hand these folks this now in the anticipation of taking it back.
Yeah.
Over, keeping
Is
people
it-
basically at a level tax, at least those people at a level tax rate.
Is it $30 a quarter, or is it $30 for the year? So I meant to ask.
I think it's every bill.
Yeah, so it's $30 every quarter.
Yeah. So that is a good point. You know, it's coming up now. We're obviously looking at school building. We're looking at, you know, potential override. So
I think it's annually.
Oh, so it's only $30 a
The average tax
year.
bill is $10,000, so that's not your quarterly bill, I hope.
Yeah, I was wondering per tax bill. But you're right, that's a year.
Judy is raising her hand.
Judy, would you like something to discuss?
Oh, thank you. I didn't think of this while Nick was still there, but I believe there's a program in town for seniors where they can work off a tax credit, like work in lieu of taxes, not your entire tax bill for sure. But like if you go to the town hall, there is like a greeter at that desk, and that's one of those types of jobs that the town offers for a consideration of your tax bill in a reduction. So you're offsetting your time and hours for a little bit of relief monetarily in your tax bill. So I'm putting this down in my notes, and maybe someone else can too in case I lose my notes. How will this circuit breaker matching by the town affect that program? Does anyone know what program I'm talking about?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, so that was a curious question after Nick left, of course. You know, I was a little behind the 8 ball on that question. But it might be something we would want to remember to ask when we get the actual article. So I'm counting on you all to keep good notes when I lose mine. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy. Jay?
I think Judy made a good point, and there's also another program that I believe allows certain seniors to just not pay their tax bill, and it accrues with interest until they either pass or sell their property. So just the question of, we've got 3 moving pieces. How do these 3 moving pieces all work together? Sure they've thought it through.
I'm sorry. I'm unaware of that program, though. Is there information on that somewhere, or? Those two?
All I can tell you is that I know we expanded it a couple years ago. Like it was open to a certain slice of people, and we opened it up, and I think we also made the interest rate better, higher, lower, better for the homeowner. I only know about it because it was tweaked a couple years ago. I will say,
I'll ask Nick about it.
Yeah, I do not. I'm aware, I'm aware of what Jay said, how they expanded. I'm also aware of the non-payment of taxes. I don't have information about that, though, but it would be something good to ask Nick, or look at the town website.
so can I circle back to a few minutes ago? Maybe I'm the only one who was too slow, but we're talking about $30 a year. That's the $30 that everybody else in town will be paying more. Okay, not the seniors
credit.
benefit,
Yeah,
$30
no,
a year.
correct.
Seniors
Your
benefit,
benefit will be 500
couple
to
thousand.
1,200.
okay.
Are you good on that, Jay?
Yeah.
It's
Liz?
not, in answer to your question about the deferral, it's on the Milton webpage. It's in the assessor's department. If you just look at deferral, it's right there. If anybody applying.
I'll send them.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
And can I ask everyone a question? Did Nick indicate, would the assessors be administering this program?
Yes. Yeah.
So it would be the assessor's office.
And they would come up with the specific meat of it, I think. So the rules would track with the circuit breaker, eligibility requirements, and then I guess it would be determined at some point what percentage it would be, and if there would be a total amount that would be distributed, or if it would just be distributed like 100% match or whatever percent match, and then the assessor's office would kind of build out all the application process and then administer it.
And I heard that there were 415, I think was the number that came out, about half of those people would probably apply.
Right.
So
So it's not
it's not a huge number.
It's not a huge number, but sort of to your point, I think that from what I always hear at town meeting, it would mean a lot to those people. So I think it's a good program that we should look more into. I agree.
Anybody else? Anything else to discuss as to the third item on the agenda? Okay. Yeah, Liz.
Well, Macy and I had an update about, not really, but we're meeting with the fire department chief and the police chief this week.
Phenomenal.
So we're meeting with Chief King tomorrow.
Yep.
And then Chief Madden on Friday.
On Friday.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for that. Hopefully these numbers help you. I know in being on that committee for a couple of years, it's kind of stayed the same. So, but it might be, those two departments, public safety, a good chance to talk about things maybe that would be very helpful to the town if they had it in their possession. So, thank you so much.
Do they also manage traffic, the police department? Not manage traffic, but
Yeah, Chief King will explain there was, and then wasn't, and now there is a dedicated traffic enforcement officer.
great.
They also, have, they will handle traffic at the schools
Okay.
and stuff, but like enforcement, parking, those
Yeah.
types of things. I
Yeah.
think there's one dedicated person.
What
that does
about cameras? Do they manage the cameras that are on the lights or anything like that? Do you know? I will find out. I can ask him tomorrow. I'm just curious because there was a pedestrian that was killed last night. And so the first thing I thought of was, I was wondering whether there were cameras, as they do in the
there's
city of Boston.
There's a lot of cameras in Milton.
Yeah, oh, good. That's good to know.
You can see at the intersections, the blue box.
Great. Okay. And do the police department, do you know,
I
manage
believe they
those?
administer. I'm sure, there's a server
we'll
and
find out,
where
yeah.
that is dumped and iCloud, and it'd be interesting because that gets very costly.
Oh, yes, it does.
Digital storage of
It
data.
does cost a lot.
And if there's like a right over, but we're getting down to a crazy.
No, it is very expensive storage, and
But thanks for the update. Very helpful. Jay.
Now, I don't know how this overlaps with what you're asking, but DPW recently has hired I think a consultant, a traffic consultant. So I don't know how the two jobs domains overlap, but fortunately Liz is working on both.
I love to talk about traffic.
Yeah.
I hate traffic, and I love to talk about it.
It would be interesting too, because I know DPW
Sent
had
you my thoughts.
talked about, some traffic calming measures that they wanted to put into town, and it'd be interesting to see kind of the work, if there's any work between the police, the engineer, traffic consultant, in terms of it, and the traffic commission, and, how they figure these things out, and are they all talking to each other?
Well, clearly, the blinky lights that I hate do not work.
Where are the blink lights that you don't want?
ones right
Everywhere,
there?
the stop signs, the
Crosswalks, you mean?
crosswalks, or just this, coming up on the stop sign, or the slow Randolph Ave, you're speeding, blinky, put a camera, ticket my car, and send me a bill. That's
Yeah.
my suggestion.
It's interesting because, so due to all of my traffic obsession, I've talked to really everybody that's in charge of traffic at all in this town, and it's very interesting with respect to the blinking lights in particular, because some things are there has to be a specific amount of traffic in order for the state to allow you to have certain things. And then some of it is sort of too many warnings people will ignore. And so anyway, I really credit the Traffic Commission and the DPW and the police because they really know all of these things. But I'm definitely interested in that as well. But I think that they do all, to answer your question, they do all work together on this. And so for my tiny little pilot project of the speed bumps on my street, we met with everybody and the select board ultimately voted on them. But it was the police were involved, the fire department were involved, the traffic commission were involved, the select board were involved, and the town administrator. There was a lot of people.
It's just a concern because Milton's become such a cut-through town.
Yes,
It's
really
awful.
is.
Last Monday, which is usually a low traffic day, because most people telework on that day, it took some people in my office an hour to travel from Milton to Quincy. An hour
In
on
Quincy.
Monday to Quincy, to 100 Hancock Street, which
I
is,
believe it.
it was awful.
Was that the holiday day?
No, no,
Okay.
it was a regular, but I think maybe Waze was sending everyone as a cut through, whatever happened on 95, people cut through, and that's the problem.
This is our demise.
Yeah,
So when they started doing construction on Granite Ave, it slowed, when they do construction, they would like bumped out into the street, which would have been nice if they didn't, but it brought everybody to a slow down on the highway and the regular traffic.
to get off, yeah.
And people started cutting through all our streets on East Milton. They started just going around. All of a sudden, at 7 to 8 in the morning, there's just like nonstop traffic on the streets.
It's just, it's
That
so
wasn't there
difficult to get
6
through.
months ago.
Yeah, get through, even East Milton, I avoid it like the plague, because you can't get out,
You can't go anywhere.
yeah. And it's just, I don't know, it just seems to have,
11, it's like 11 and 2. That's the only time you can go anywhere in town.
it seems to have worsened in the last 5 years. No, it's okay, like, it's just, right? Is it just me?
Absolutely.
It wasn't like that
No,
20 years ago.
No.
It's just,
You.
Wasn't there 5 years ago?
right? Yeah,
Yeah.
it seems like it's just a 5-year,
It's like post-COVID, it just like went bang.
yeah,
you
yeah,
know?
so.
And part of that is we're really hamstrung by, the highway, and then some of it's been explained to me that, for example, I live on Governor's Road, which is in East Milton, part of which is in Quincy. So a lot of it is sort of hamstrung by what Quincy or Boston will allow, or the state will allow with respect to the highway. So we can't, I know at one point there were discussions about like closing off part of the road and Governor's Road, and you can't because it affects
'Cause it's
Quincy.
cut through from Quincy,
And it
yeah.
affects, so it's very challenging and it all impacts other streets once you do one street, so.
I was just grateful when they turned Brook Road into a 1 lane. It was 2 lanes, it was a highway. People were just, yeah.
They should do that on Randolph Ave.
I agree. And yeah,
Put down trees down the middle.
I agree.
Put
To that
stop
end-
lights at every street.
As much as we like to talk about traffic,
Discussion.
I have to.
about it.
I have to bring
To
back.
stay until,
I know, this is something we can
Talk
also,
about traffic.
we can say till midnight. We should have a,
No, thanks.
but anyway, thank you, Liz, for working
yeah.
with DPW.
No, honestly, it's a big issue. I think it needs some budget attention, our public works, traffic mitigation. And it's a very popular topic because it affects everyone. Going to the store, going to drop your kids off, going
And when
to
you
work.
talk about
coming back.
the senior taxes, the seniors that live in town, they need to go to CVS to pick up their medicines. It just with all that traffic, so it's a public safety concern.
And,
Or
you
even
know,
walking across the street.
Like
Or a
last night.
pedestrian, like that poor woman.
And, will have, obviously, the chief of police who's head of the traffic commission and, others in to explore these more, especially in light of, the budget and a potential override and maybe some extra money being available and what
Right,
we could do with
exactly.
it, so.
Well, I had a question about that real quick. So last year, there was money appropriated by town meeting for traffic control measures. But because I wasn't on the Warrant Committee last year, I don't know if that was something that was requested by the DPW or how that came to be in the budget.
I'm gonna speak off the cuff
I mean, I can find out.
And I believe that was within the budget. I think it was $20,000
Yeah.
for traffic mitigation. I think that's what they received for traffic
Is it,
mitigation.
the
I remember
DPW
that number.
requested it then?
They requested it.
Okay.
I can't tell you in terms of the final, but I remember because I did DPW with another member, and it was 20K. I think we wanted more.
It was 20K for actual traffic, so there was the study part, and then there was like the actual
Calming measures.
traffic calming measures, so it's more than that, but yeah, exactly, you're right.
So that it was like the two things.
The two.
But
But that was through the DPW's request.
yeah, and at the time it was Chase Berkeley, a former, and there was a discussion about that, and I think he said it should be a lot more, but it's kind of one shovel at a time type of thing. It was his approach to most of his projects at DPW.
Right.
Just do the little as I can and then move on. So, but like I said, that's off the top of my head. So, okay, I'd like to just move us on to warrant committee minute approval. Karen, we have minutes that need approval. I would like to say all these minutes are from last year. So our present members cannot vote on them. But we do have a quorum. I think we have all of our returning members present. So as you looked at the minutes, we'd like to do an approval of those minutes. Karen, is that?
Yeah, if you'd like, I can read the dates again, or we can approve them as a unit. And do you want me to call the people that are here?
If we could, I think we should do a formal roll, just because we have this issue. I'm up to any suggestions. This would just be a vote of last year's members as to approving the minutes.
Why aren't minutes approved in subsequent meetings?
We didn't get to it last year, so now falls on my soul's shoulders. We're trying to be much better with this. I think every committee and board we've had meetings, everyone has issues with minutes, but last year I think we fell behind and we just didn't approve them. So we have to do it now. But as a new member, you don't have to, you will not vote on it. So we're just gonna keep it to the returning members. So do you wanna read? I forwarded these minutes.
He has a question.
Well, I'll read the dates and then maybe call the names, and folks, Judy may have.
Sure, Judy.
Tom, in regards to the voting,
Sure.
I think I heard when we opened our year for warrant committee that as long as new members abstained, that would be kosher. Like they can't vote yes or no, I believe. So instead of segregating each group out, new members, returning members, I don't know, what do you think?
Oh, that would be fine too. It doesn't, Judy, I don't know, because.
I don't know
We're
either.
kind of
I
making
just-
this up as we go along, unfortunately, because we've never faced this issue, or as long as I've been on the committee, so.
Didn't we have that last year where we were a couple of months behind? And I'm trying very hard to remember whether it wasn't that many minutes either. But I know that it really caught my attention when the select board had that facing them. And they went even a step further. You had to figure out whether you were actually at the meeting of the minutes. It was very complicated what they were trying to do. But I think you can't vote on anything that you weren't at. And however we get there is, could be either just calling out. So if we didn't have a quorum of returning members, then the new members would act as the quorum buffer by just abstaining. I think that's what I was trying to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy.
Hold on.
Judy, do you have your hand up again?
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Oh.
It's a very sensitive trackpad, so if you even breathe near it, your hand goes up again.
Okay, so,
Thank you.
you know, we have a concerns from a member. I'm not sure what we did in previous years. So, you know, let's, out of an abundance of caution and a belt and suspenders approach to this, may I ask the new members to abstain?
Absolutely.
Unless, of course, you know, just, we have you just abstain. And that way the record is clear as to everybody, and we're not singling out anybody. So Judy, thank you for mentioning that. So Karen, can you, and I'm, in this vote, as we're doing it, as I have, you know, it's the expectation that each and every one of our returning members has reviewed the minutes in full. I enjoyed reviewing them. It brought back a lot of memories from last year. Good. They were all good memories. So I trust that you're voting, you have reviewed the minutes. Lori and a few other people did find some mistakes that a couple were significant and they were corrected. So that all being said, Karen, can you start with the first list of minutes that needs approval and then go through the roll?
Sure. The minutes up for approval are May 8th, 2023. And then for 2024, we have February 5th, February 26th, March 11th, March 13th, March 18th, March 20th, March 26th, and March 27th.
Okay.
And the motion,
I will move to accept the Lori?
Before you start, I've got changes on 2 already, so I don't know how you want to do them.
We probably should have done this before I started to move towards a vote.
I know, I'm sorry. I just when she was reading them, I realized we had a lot.
Okay, so what I'm going to do is, I think now, in light of this, we should not vote.
I have 3 sets that I'm,
Everyone needs to review them. So
do you think everybody has it?
I would rather, if there's changes, I'd rather them be circulated online.
Ahead of time.
And
Got it.
everyone can review them, as opposed to doing it when we have people out here and we don't have copies for people and stuff.
Do you want to vote on the ones that don't have changes?
We could do that.
Has that been reviewed already by everyone?
Well, I don't know if anybody else has any changes or edits or comments.
Does anyone have any edits, changes, or comments to the minutes? Okay, so no one does.
Okay.
So what are the dates of the meetings that you have substantive changes to?
Oh, I was going to say the ones that can be approved, that I had gone through and were okay. Do you want to approve those?
Not all of them?
No, I found a couple of others.
Okay.
Okay, so we're
So-
going to take some out?
Yes. But I mean, it's up to you, however you want to do it. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm not comfortable doing this on the agenda now. So I did also. So we're going to strike this from the agenda. It's on Wednesdays, so maybe we can revisit it then, Karen.
Okay.
So I'm sorry. Again, returning members, can we please review the minutes? And if there's any changes, can you alert me and Karen to them? Thanks.
I know Andrew said this, but can we do you think it's easy to try to do this going forward, for the previous meeting,
I think
on
so.
Wednesday, do today's or whatever the next meeting?
Yes, and that's just, Karen listens to the meeting,
Yeah.
does them, and the moment she has them done, we get them. So that's going to be on me as the chair to make sure we move these forward.
That's an excellent suggestion.
There are AI add-ons to Zoom that will help summarize the meeting for us. It's not perfect, but it's
And
something you
Teams.
might
It's great.
save a lot of time with.
Or you can do a transcription service on Zoom too, because we,
Yeah.
yeah.
All of
Highly
the
recommend it.
minutes will be 59 pages.
No.
However-
The thing about
Oh, the summary.
It's
the
AI
the
summary.
AI summaries is that
Can you do that on the Zoom?
you can do it on Zoom. I'm not familiar with
Oh.
that. You can do it in Teams, and the advantage of all these AI tools is that not only can it identify discussion topics, but it's smart enough to identify open items.
Oh, cool.
And speakers, if everybody is logged in under their name. But it also gives you a head start framework to edit the minutes rather than starting them from
Oh,
scratch.
that's cool.
You still have to go in and do it, but
Right.
have a human eye too, but it
Yeah,
would give
you
you
have
a
some.
head start. Is our next meeting in the fire station, I feel like? Why do I think it's in the fire station?
The high
Next
school
meeting.
AV room, right?
The high school AV room.
On Wednesday?
No, it's not. It's here in the Cronin.
Oh,
Oh,
it is, Wednesday's meeting? Okay.
recently got lost in the fire station going to a different meeting. and it
Oh,
was-
really?
Yeah, it was posted today, and it's at 7, Wednesday the 30th, in the Cronin.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Is there a meeting next Monday as well?
I'm going to.
Oh, no, is it a holiday, right? Is it a holiday? No, not yet.
That's the following week.
What a holiday is it?
So I have, we do have future scheduling,
Yeah.
Okay.
and there were a couple of more committees that I wanted to invite in, one of them being potentially the planning board. I'm not certain, and they might be just hearing that new right now as it came out of my mouth, but there are a couple of other committees that maybe like to come in and just discuss their budget issues in light of a potential school debt exclusion. So I think the hope is that the committee is armed with enough information about what else is going on in town, what we're looking down the road in May before we start moving on a school, just to kind of have that in the back of your head. I think it's a wise thing, just so we have a full picture before we make our comment or recommendation. So, anything else about scheduling? I should know maybe by Wednesday or Thursday if we're gonna have a Monday meeting. Anybody have anything else like to add about future scheduling? Okay. Is there a motion?
Motion to adjourn.
I second that.
Seconded.
I second that.
Okay. Motion being seconded, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much, Warrant Committee.
Thank you.
Thank you.